Truman is the center of excellence in education in human and natural sciences. Those of you that may be aware of our city college system, each one of our colleges represents a distinction. We build out educators and train new educators in the field of education. So we're extremely excited to play our role in this city in regards to benefiting our students and families across the city, specifically in education. So I just wanted to take a moment this evening to welcome you on behalf of City College of Chicago, as well as our Truman family. And we look forward to having a productive conversation with you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President. I also want to acknowledge that our Chief Officer of CPS is here, Pedro Martinez. He will be joining us as well. And so you'll notice a lot of our city leadership will be here today to hear from you. And maybe that's the question, why are we here? This is the 6th of 6 meetings. I want to give you a round of applause for joining us today to talk about this really important conversation. Thank you for joining us and really talking about the important stuff, which is public safety. We have been convening these meetings across the city because we know that each region has distinct needs, perceptions, and concerns, and so we want to be able to address them. And today we have 3 goals at all of these events. The first is to inform. We want to make sure that you know what's happening, what's going to happen, and what's being planned. And so at your table, you will see a sheet that lists some resources. We can go to the next slide. Next slide. This worksheet that you have, it details a lot of resources that the city currently has. There's also a city resource fair happening outside of this room. You can talk to city representatives if you have a specific question. There is also another flyer on your table, next slide, that talks about our investments for 2022. And in our presentation in a little bit, there will be more in-depth information about our investments specifically to youth and mental health. But we do want to make sure that you see this flyer. It talks about both our goals of our investing in building a better Chicago. And then in the next slide, this very nice chart shows you all of the specific investments into different streams and projects that we have to do. That's the flyer, and so everyone in this room, you can see where we're really sending our investments and where we're really focusing on in order to discuss public safety, because everyone in this room, law enforcement included, knows that we can't law enforce our way out of violence. It really is about addressing the root cause of violence. So again, if you look at the flyer, you'll see the $1.9 billion in total investments in youth programs, in jobs, housing security, trauma recovery, public health, mental health, and other services that we know prevent violence from happening in the first place. Very important that these figures do not include the billions invested by our sister agencies like CPS, parks, CHA, and libraries. All those investments help address the root cause of violence as well by giving people purpose and hope. Outside about talking about the things that we are providing and the plans that we do have, our second goal today is to be a thought partner with you. We want to be able to work together to solve the most pressing problem that's facing our city. So we've already asked you to complete the survey. There's a QR code on your table. If you haven't had a chance to fill it out, please do so. And there's also a sheet on your table that there's one worksheet, and in a little bit, we're going to ask you to work together to share the 5 things that you think should happen to make the city safer. These sheets are going to be collected at the end of this meeting, and all of your ideas are going to be consolidated and compared to the insights that we've been collecting in the other regions. And this is going to be captured and made into a report that we will prepare and share after all of our engagements are complete. And finally, our third goal, which I think is why you're here, is that we want to hear from you and want to answer your questions. You received a question card that looks like this. There's a few of them on your table. We have plenty if you need one. And this is where we're going to ask you to fill out your question or comment in regard to public safety. We will be picking them up as well, and there's staffers around the room that are going to be picking them up throughout our evening. If you need more, raise your hand. As I said, we'll be able to provide them. Si los quieres escribir en español, no hay problema. We can also have them in other languages. It's more than okay. By collecting the questions, we have found that we're able to group them together and get through most of the topics. It also gives us insight to the most important topics when we visit communities. And I promise we're not doing this to avoid the tough questions. We do this because we think the tough questions is what gets us closest to the resolution. And so the mayor, CPD superintendent, and other city leaders will be here shortly. They want to hear from you and answer as many questions as they can. And again, those questions that we can't answer, they will still be captured and placed into the report. And so with that, I want to turn this over to Tamara Mahal, who will share information about what we're doing to implement a coordinated approach to public safety. Thank you.
Glad to see my fan club showed up tonight. Hi everyone, my name is Tamara Mahal. I am the Chief Coordination Officer for Community Safety. And this is a new role that's been created at the city to ensure that we're applying the lessons learned through the COVID-19 pandemic to what the city's greatest public health crisis and epidemic is, gun violence. I want to talk for just a second about what we learned through COVID and why that's so important here. Obviously, COVID really tested the city, not just as a government, but across every sector in terms of how we work together and how we see ourselves through a single lens, which in that case was infectious disease, but in this case has to be violence prevention. What the government learned is that it works best when it's data-driven and evidence-based, when it's coordinated, but most importantly, when it's authentically acting in service of community. And that means a deep level of engagement to really say, in your community, in your neighborhood, on your block, what is going to work to solve the problem. The problems that we see in violence are not different than the problems that drove the disparities that we saw in Black and brown communities across COVID. They are the root causes of violence, actually. Next slide. Yep, there you go. And when we talk about this, it's really important because so often when we think about violence prevention, community safety, we hear police and enforcement. And while it is so critically important that our law enforcement is working to have trust with community, build bridges, and hold those accountable that are perpetrating crimes, we are not going to be able to sustainably end violence unless we address the root causes that exist. The city is doing that in two ways. I'm going to talk about what we're looking at in terms of long-term and strategic investments, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing immediately to address the current crisis. First things first, you saw that investment sheet. I just want to point out a couple of key things that I know as a parent and resident, I find a lot of hope in. When we talk about violence, we consistently hear from those that are most at risk, I lack food, I lack housing, I need a long-term job, and I've experienced a high level of trauma. We are utilizing the incredible amount of money coming in through the federal government to match money that was already being spent by normally budgeted funds to address these issues. That includes over $1 billion in building more affordable housing across 19 different communities in the city of Chicago. We have increased funding for mental health. And I want to be clear about this. Healing can start in a lot of different places. It can start in a church, it can start in a school, yes, it can start with behavioral health, but we have to increase the access to services to traditional behavioral health services from those locations, and so we're dedicating over $80 million, which is a significant increase, times 8 of what was done before, to address that recurring crisis. Violence prevention for us means investing in a couple different things. One, youth employment and out-of-school opportunities. And when I say youth, I'm not just talking about the under 18 population, I'm talking about emerging adults. Over 40% of the city shooting victims are between the ages of 18 and 24. Sometimes they're still in high school, they often have children, they have a lot of needs, and we want to be here to support them with programming, but most importantly, job opportunities and educational opportunities. We are also increasing our investments, and I mean times 20-fold, in violence prevention in the form of community outreach and victim services. This helps us to mediate gang conflicts, but also ensure that those are at highest risk of violence are getting access to services, while also ensuring that we can provide adequate supports for victims of violence in the city of Chicago, thus preventing retaliation. $25 million of our funding is going to support the city's first ever gender-based violence strategic plan and supports. A couple other areas that I'll just focus on too. We know that lack of long-term unemployment is a key mitigating factor around violence, and so we are spending $20 million not just to create more jobs, but provide the wraparound support services that so often inhibit someone from getting a good long-term job. Transportation assistance, stipends, childcare, those services that we know are so critical to support. And finally, I just want to highlight that we understand the role that community blight, the physical degradation of our community, is playing in so many different neighborhoods across Chicago. So new investments are coming to fix streets, implement capital improvement plans, but just make sure that critical city services are proactively being taken care of on your blocks. And that means getting, yes, your potholes filled, your trees trimmed, your trash picked up, but also making sure in our communities where vacant lots, abandoned buildings are driving violence, that we're able to rehab and turn those over. So what does that mean in terms of how we're all working together? Next slide. Our biggest lesson learned was that government can be uncoordinated. We're an extremely complex beast. We have 33 departments and 30,000 plus employees. So the mayor activated the Community Safety Coordination Center to bring together the departments that are working on violence to actually serve community. This means we're implementing a comprehensive and coordinated strategy that addresses long-term policy reforms that are needed, reinvests in the community and our infrastructure, and provides better support for those who are most at risk of perpetrating violence. And we are doing this on the hyper-local level. We are literally working on block levels. You're going to be at tables today with city personnel. We want to hear about what you're doing, and we will be back with different levels of engagement to be able to talk about what is really needed on your block, especially through the existing engagement mechanisms the Chicago Police Department has. What does that mean for now, though? Well, we've been doing a lot of engagement, and if you go to the next slide, what we found is there are a few key strategies people feel that we need to be implementing most. So first and foremost, we are not only expanding equitable access to mental health, but implementing trauma-informed services amongst lay workers like faith leaders and street outreach, so that when they're directly working with those that are at heightened risk of violence, they can mediate conflicts in a way that reduces them. We're making sure we've expanded programming for out of school, especially for this summer. Commissioner Kanazi will be here to talk about the over 10,000 job opportunities and how we're targeting those to make sure those most at need, whether they're housing unstable or yes, justice involved, are getting prioritized for those jobs. We're also going to be out increasing green space everywhere. Green space has a tremendous effect on our ability to support each other, build good relationships with neighbors. And so we're going to be out there planting trees, 75,000 new ones, but also working to improve our parks and the infrastructure you see every day. And then finally, this is one of these foundational things. We're going to coordinate at the community level. Why? We need to make sure those most at risk have direct access to services within their communities. By doing this, we really believe that we not only will work to reduce violence this summer, but for the first time maybe in Chicago's history, we will reasonably reduce violence in the long term by ensuring that these investments don't go to waste over the next few years, but making sure that they build on to successful metrics coming up. All right, so with that being said, I need your help. I run the CSCC. We're putting out some cool stuff. You may have heard a little bit of an announcement yesterday. We'll answer questions about the provision of cameras and lighting and so on and so forth. But we have a poll, as Nubia mentioned, that has some really important questions on it about safe spaces, what you need to support your block, and any ideas that you may have to support violence prevention. We're going to put out a report with these answers, but what I want to say to you in my commitment is we're actually going to be implementing those ideas, and faster than maybe even you think, because we think our best ideas do come from the community. And this is my 6th town hall. I've been looking at different ideas that have come in, and I'll say they're definitely inspiring some of the thinking that we're doing around community safety. I'm looking forward to answer your questions. Thanks for bearing through a longer presentation. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Nubia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamara. So this is the fun part, right? We're going to be able to work together. Before we start, I do want to give you a moment to fill out or finish your questions. We're going to be collecting them now. There's still opportunity to submit questions if you haven't had a chance to write them down, but I am going to give you a moment to make sure you have whatever burning question you have about public safety ready to go, because we will have the Q&A panel in about 30-ish minutes. After that is the fun part, right? You're going to introduce yourself to your table mates. We're going to ask that you assign someone as a record keeper, and there is the one worksheet on your table. You're going to work together to talk about the 5 things that you think we should address as a city to address public safety. You don't have to come to a consensus, but it is helpful. And again, we're going to be able to record these and put them in a report after this engagement. You don't need to write your name, but if you could write the neighborhoods that are represented, that'll also give us a good idea of who's here and who's at the table. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. Someone on the floor will go to you. Again, we'll be collecting the questions and then start working on the worksheet. So really appreciate that. We have 30 minutes, and I'll be back with about a 5-minute warning. Thank you so much. Before we get started introducing our today's speakers, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge some of the other commissioners who've been able to join us. I want to especially say hello to Chancellor Salgado. If you want to raise your hand, and all the other commissioners who've been able to join us, if they can raise their hands, we can say hello and welcome to them. Thank you so much for being here. I'll say yes, thank you. Any aldermen here who are still here, if you want to raise your hand, just so there are some folks we can all still see who's here. Thank you so much, Vasquez, Alderman Tunney, and Kappelman. Thank you so much for being here. Great. So we are going to begin the question and answer portion. Oh, yes, Alderman Vasquez. We gave him a shout out when he started, but he is right here, ready to roll. Thank you. I want to introduce the mayor, who's going to give us a few remarks, and then we will get started.
All right, good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me in the back? Yeah, sounds like it. Thank you all for being here. And I want to thank my colleagues in the City Council for also attending, as well as the City Commissioners. We'll introduce the folks that are here on the stage, but there are a number of other City Commissioners who are also in the audience. I want to thank the members of the Police Department who are also here. I think it's important for them to hear from you as well in these forums. I want to thank Kevin Graham, former president of the FOP, who's also here tonight. The reason that we are doing these town halls is it's really important for us to hear from you. I think everyone in the city who cares about public safety recognizes that 2021 was a year that was very tough for all of us across the city. We ended the year in a place that none of us ever want to be in again. And so in thinking about what we could do to make sure that 2022 was a better year for public safety all the way around, we spent a lot of time thinking about what worked in 2021, but importantly, what did not, and what the areas for improvement was. And this was a discussion that was had amongst a lot of different folks, obviously the superintendent and his command staff, but also the folks that are up here and members of the mayor's office. And one thing that became very clear is we needed to do deeper engagement with the residents of the city. We needed to be more transparent about what was happening in a ward by ward, district by district basis, but we also needed to hear from you. So one of the important initiatives that we stood up last year, really starting in August, was the Community Safety Coordination Center, which Tamara Mahal heads up. And a part of that work is not only bringing city departments together in one space, so every facet of public safety, from public health to schools, to libraries, and of course, the police department, the Department of Family and Support Services, but also making sure that we were reaching out into community. And what we heard from our community partners was more engagement, more engagement, more engagement. So that is really what's brought us here. We wanted to also make sure that we gave you an opportunity as neighbors to interact with each other. That's part of the reason you're doing the exercises of what is it that, name the 5 things that you think could make a difference in the quality of life in your neighborhood and across the city around community safety. One other thing that I'll add is our cabinet, every single department, whether it's the folks that are up here or streets and sanitation, CDOT, every single department has been tasked with making sure that they view their daily work through a community safety lens. Now, it might not be intuitive that the folks who pick up your garbage in the streets have a role to play, but they do. One of the things we've heard from you over and over again is trash, vacant lots, that lowers the quality of life, and we've got to be much more diligent about making sure that we address those issues. So we've made, as you can see from your table, with the support of City Council, a number of critical investments that we believe also really go to community safety. Things like investing in affordable housing, making sure that we're investing in the environment, mental health supports, and a theme that's run through all of these town halls that we've attended. What are we doing to give our young people productive activities, particularly in their out-of-school times over the course of the summer, so we can make sure that we're supporting them and give them opportunities to engage in things that take them off the streets and get them in, and not get them in trouble. So there's a tremendous amount of investments that have gone into our young people as part of the budget that was passed and the investments that we're able to make both through our corporate dollars, but also because of the American Rescue Plan dollars that came to our city. So fundamentally, what I want you to know is public safety is the priority. Not amongst a list of things, it is the priority. And let me put this in some context. Last year, economically, we had a phenomenal year. A phenomenal year, one of the best in recent memory in Chicago. We consistently have had the lowest unemployment rate of any big city in the country. We had $9 billion in venture capital and other investments in our city. We had 173 businesses make what we call pro-Chicago decisions, meaning relocating to Chicago from someplace else or an existing business substantially expanding its footprint in Chicago. We had what are called 12 unicorns minted last year. And for those of you who don't know, that means a business that's valued at $1 billion or more. We had 12 of them, and that has moved us ahead of Seattle in the number of tech startups and others in our city. So we've got a lot of great stories to tell about why we're on the move, why we have the most diverse economy in the country, and how we're recovering better than every other big city. But if we don't get public safety right, all of the great things pale in comparison. It's like a cloud that hangs over everything else. That is why public safety is the priority. And everyone in city government understands that. All our commissioners, deputy commissioners on down, we have to do a better job in 2022 to help you feel safe because you are safer. So that's why this level of engagement is so critically important. So I'm going to stop here because I think the best part of these town halls is your questions. But I do want to thank you once again for coming and spending your Tuesday evening with us. Hopefully you've met somebody that you didn't know before, that you've formed a relationship with, and that you're going to get something out of this dialogue that'll help you understand where your taxpayers are going, the kind of strategy that we're employing, and we've gotten a lot of great ideas from you already about things that we can implement right away to make communities safer. So thank you so much, and Nubia will take the questions.
Thank you so much, Mayor.
So shall we first, though, introduce
Yes,
everybody?
let's introduce it, if we don't mind, starting with Commissioner Kanazi.
Good evening. Oh, sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. I'm Brandi Kanazi, Commissioner for the Chicago Department of Family and Support Services. We are the city's human and social service arm, so we provide services from early learning youth all the way through the senior years. We have 6 community service centers. One is actually 4 blocks to the east at 845 North Wilson, or West Wilson, where we provide case management and offer services, as well as 21 senior centers. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Pedro Martinez, the CEO for the Chicago Public Schools. Just very blessed to be here, to be the CEO, but also growing up here in Chicago, going to Benito Juarez in the Lower West Side. What I love about these venues is I get to meet people, and we're like kindred spirits, right? Regardless of where you grew up in the city, we all have similar stories. So thank you for being here tonight.
I'm Superintendent David Brown, and before I continue on, I just want to have all the officers here to stand. And please stand, all the officers here. Thank you all so much. That's the introduction, because these are the men and women that do the work at protecting our communities and collaborating with all these departments to ensure that we are engaging the community and that we are visible. Now, we're listening tonight for any gaps and deficiencies we have so that we can step up our game in ways that the community wants us to. So instead of us assuming or just using data, we want to hear from you on what we need to do more of, whether that's foot patrols, whether that's more visibility on the CTA, whether that's bike patrols. We need to hear more and more what you want from us. We have an idea, we have a 5-point strategic plan, but we cannot be successful without you. We absolutely need the community to do our jobs better at protecting you. So we need your help in helping us help you. Now, I will take a seat, but I'll be here for questions during the formal Q&A and also afterward to take questions from you all. I've been around to some of the tables and really good conversations, and thank you.
Good evening again, everyone. I'm Tamara Mahal. I'm the Chief Coordination Officer for Community Safety, and I oversee the Community Safety Coordination Center, where we are bringing together public safety infrastructure and social services departments and agencies to implement a comprehensive community safety strategy that really address the root causes of violence. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Allison Arwady. I'm the Commissioner at the Chicago Department of Public Health. And you all are used to hearing me on COVID. It's been lovely to think about how do we take what has worked well in the Chicago COVID response and use it to apply to violence prevention and really mental health services and all of the ways in which COVID has brought to light the many, many ways in which we can and need to do better as a city. So I'm here for questions also, but happy to talk to you after the fact. And thanks again for being here.
Great. Thank you so much. We have a pile of questions, a lot of different topics. I'm going to start with one from a resident from Lakeview. How are we addressing root causes of crime when we spend 11 times more money on police than on other life-affirming services such as affordable housing and mental health combined?
Well, this is a question that I think has come up at virtually every one of these town halls. And I've been very clear, I don't support defunding the police. Now, when I talk to people about what does that mean to you, what typically I hear is a couple of things, which is not defund specifically. And to be clear, if you look at our police budget, which is very similar to police budgets across the country, way over 90% of the police budget is personnel. So defunding means we cut the number of officers. Sometimes people think that there's a lot of programmatic fat. That's not the case with our budget. So if we defund, that means we're cutting the most junior officers who are, in many instances, the most diverse, the best trained, and frankly, the most energetic to be out there and serve, and particularly officers who come onto the job in this time, which is probably one of the most difficult times in policing in the country's history. These are people who really genuinely want to serve. And what I also hear from folks across the city is we don't want less police. What we want is more respectful, more constitutional policing. People who understand that having the community on their side is the most valuable tool that they have. Not the gun, not the badge, but the support of residents across our city. And that's absolutely right. Police legitimacy is something we have to work at every single day. There is not a crime that typically gets solved, and particularly not complicated ones, without the community. I'm looking at Commander Brennan from the 24th District. Commander Brennan and his team were able to solve a series of hate crimes that were perpetuated against the Orthodox community in his district. And how were they able to do that? They were able to do that because they had community trust. Community reported what they saw, and then based upon those tips, they were able to put together an investigative plan that ended up with the apprehension and successful charges against the individual who was making that community feel unsafe by the anti-Semitic actions that he was taking and vandalizing synagogues and Jewish schools and Jewish businesses. So that's just one example of why it's so critically important. But the other component of the defund, from what I understand from talking to lots and lots of people here in Chicago and across the country, is we want to have concrete investments in communities. We want to see more affordable housing. We want to see better schools. We want better infrastructure. And we agree. I agree. And the City Council, fortunately, also agrees, which is precisely why we're making the kind of investments that we have, some of which are displayed on your table. But beyond that, we just announced, for example, at the end of last year, $1 billion commitment around affordable housing. And frankly, many of these projects are going to be situated in areas of the city that don't typically see affordable housing. Now, we're not talking about Section 8, but we are talking about taking concrete steps to break down segregation that has held this city back for far too long. We care deeply about making sure that we're addressing the trauma that so many people have felt on a range of different issues, exacerbated by the pandemic. That's the very reason why we've tripled the budget for mental health supports in the time that I've been mayor. Now, again, I could go on, but I want to make sure we get to other questions. But it's not an either-or proposition in my mind. It's both and. We must support the police. We must make sure that they are well-trained, that we hold them accountable. But we also need to make sure that we're making the necessary investments, particularly in areas of our city that haven't seen the kind of investments that they deserve in decades, if not longer.
Thank you so much, ma'am. In a similar vein, but a little bit different, I have a question from a Lakeview resident and one from Jefferson Park that are slightly different but the same. One, why isn't there police on many corners of Mag Mile, the crown jewel of Chicago, like in the past? And a resident from Jefferson Park asks, why don't we have beat officers in the community to check up on businesses and in general?
I didn't catch all of it. I got most of it.
The question is, why isn't there police on corners on Mag Mile, and why don't we have beat officers in the community?
So we've got to walk and chew gum, which means we got to do more than one thing at a time. And let me just describe this idea of I want more cops in my neighborhood in a more broad context. There's three parts to policing. There's prevention, there's enforcement, and then there's investigations. And we have to commit resources to all three. Most of what we hear is enforcement. We want officers in my neighborhood enforcing the law. And we also hear a lot about investigations. But I think what we don't hear enough of and where we have to lean really hard into is prevention. Now, one thing I will bring up, one particular crime that affects everyone across the city is carjackings. This is the greatest example where prevention has to be part of the overall solution in the three parts of policing. So what's leading our carjacking offenders is nearly 60% are juveniles. Teens and preteens, from 11 years old to 16, 17 years old, are nearly 60% of the offenders. The judiciary doesn't have an appetite to incarcerate this population, these young people. Nor do prosecutors go for maximum sentences. What happens more likely is these young people are released back to their parents after a very short period of time. So unless any of that changes, we have to intervene in these young people's lives in ways that change their behavior. So it's not necessarily an enforcement-only solution or investigation. We capture these kids. Number one, they can't drive. So when we get behind them and chase them, they wreck out pretty quickly. They drive at reckless speeds. We catch them, but they go in and out of a revolving door of adjudication. They're not held for 20-year sentences. So we're left with, how do we intervene in a young person's life? And when I say we, I really mean we. I don't mean just this stage we. I mean, how do all of us intervene in an 11-year-old's life, in a 15-year-old's life, to change their behavior? What's causing these young people to do this at rates much higher than in the past? So it's a complex issue. It's more than just enforcement. If it were that easy, and we've learned from this being the easy solution, the quick solution, was mass incarceration. That just created cycles of violence, heights and lows and heights again, just this revolving door of high violence. We've seen it here back in 2016, same spike. Before that, just a few years before that, same spike. We're looking for a sustained decline in violence across this city, which means we have to really understand prevention, enforcement, and investigations and the right balance, as well as start having influence in the courts and in prosecutions, which is outside the city's purview. It's the county that really controls the judges and the prosecutors. So all the ecosystems of policing and criminal justice has to come into play in a collaboration that includes all of you and all of us. But we are committing more resources to District Patrol. We hear you loud and clear. We're committing more resources to the CTA. Hear you loud and clear. And more to come as we fill our vacancies. And we're having some progress on filling our vacancies. We're visiting military bases, we're visiting job fairs, and we're in all the city colleges and universities in the area, and we're having people come and apply. There's nearly 300 people in our police academy right now. So we are making progress, but again, if it's just the police trying to solve community safety, we are going to fail. We absolutely have to have a collaboration across city departments and in the community working together. Thank you.
Nubia, if I can. So I was expecting you to tee me up on the 11-year-old, but that's all right. How many of you heard the story last fall about the 11-year-old who was arrested for leading a carjacking crew? Right? And I'm sure you had the same reaction I did, which is, how in the heck does an 11-year-old get involved in carjackings? So let me tell you a little bit more about this story that you haven't heard in the news. So when the police went to his house after he was arrested, this kid had 20 key fobs in his bedroom, 20, which means he was doing a lot of carjackings. But as CPS really worked with him through a great program called Choose to Change, we started to learn and understand a little bit more about this young man's life. He was 11 at the time that he was arrested, but he had been missing from school for 2 years. So that in and of itself was a fail that we can never let happen again. The other thing that we found out is this: his mother had just died. His father is gravely ill. So he was kind of living between one place to another, but didn't have a stable home life. What we also learned is that he had an older brother who was also in this life, who was tugging and pulling this child to do more and more on the wrong side of the ledger. When CPS got involved with him, they got him stable housing with another relative. He was able to go and visit his father who's ailing. He's in a school that actually cares about him, is taking care of him. He has not missed a day because he has a mentor that goes to his house every single day to make sure he's up, he's fed, and that he's going to school in a timely fashion. So he has not missed a day since CPS has intervened with him. And importantly, this young man is on such a great path that recently he was on the honor roll in his school. Which is phenomenal. So what are the lessons that we take from this? And the superintendent, I think, got it right. We've got to reach these children who are at risk before they do something that irreparably changes the trajectory of their lives. There are many points of connection along the way, and you all know them. It's the schools, of course. It's the libraries. It's the parks. It's the after-school programs. It's police officers who are engaged with a lot of these young people themselves. We have got to do a better job of making sure that we are the village for these children, many of whom have very challenging home lives. I don't believe in locking them up and throwing away the key. I do absolutely believe, excuse me, in accountability. When you make a mistake and you hurt someone, particularly when you pick up a gun, there's got to be accountability. Right now, what we have, as the superintendent said, is this revolving door. These young people that we're arresting have 3, 4, 5, and even higher number of cases pending that are not being adjudicated through the juvenile system. We have to step up if the county isn't going to do its job, because our young people in this city are in crisis. And if we can bring down the number of young people that are criminal injustice involved, we can make a huge dent in crime. We know that, and that's why we're doing everything we can to reach these young people. More outreach is being done, so the programs and the investments that we're making, we're going to bring them to the young people and their families. Now, if we present them with opportunities and they choose not to take it, then that's on them. But I don't want a single family, a single young person who's in crisis, not to know that there's a hand that is ready to reach out to them and help support them and turn them back on a better path. So that, to me, is a big lesson learned from this 11-year-old. If we do the right thing, if we support them, if we get them back on the right path with the resources that are readily available all across the city, we can turn the tide in meaningful ways. But we need your help also to do that. Thank you.
We had a few questions on trust building with the police. There's one specific question from an Uptown resident that asks, what concrete actions are proposed to reduce police bias, misconducts, and the cost of settlements?
You want to start with
I'll start. We do hold our officers accountable. There are significant consequences for misconduct. In addition to our internal affairs, we also have COPA and the IG that can conduct an investigation. We are trying as best we can to identify early officers that are going down the path of misconduct and intervene in ways that redirects their behavior as well. So the earlier we can get what issues are causing this officer to violate our rules and get them into whatever services they need. The mayor alluded to this, and no excuses for misconduct, but it is the most difficult time to be a police officer in this country. What hadn't been reported as much about what's happening, notwithstanding the misconduct, is there's been a 500% increase in officers shot at or shot over these last 2 years. Just recently we had, over the weekend, officers shot at, answering a domestic. So the pressures of the job can lead to officer wellness issues. You know, physically they look well, but emotionally there are challenges doing this job. And many people when they're stressed, make awful decisions. Now, some of this may be a willful, violation of our rules, and we are strongly not making any excuses for that. But I would just tell you, we want these people to continue to risk their lives for us, all of us. We do. And so in the way we deal with misconduct has to be firm, but at the same time, not painting everyone with the same broad brush. That those officers who do the job in the right ways are encouraged as much as we discourage officers that violate our rules. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. Many people think all cops are, they've heard this, not only to defund the police, abolish the police. They've heard all police are racist. They've heard a lot of hyper-criticism about policing. And many of our young officers are on social media most of their free time. And so they hear a really hyper criticism of what they do. And what we don't want to happen is the good cops get discouraged. And that small minority of cops that don't follow the rules hijack the organization. We want to have a bright line that the rules have to be abided by. And when they're not, there are serious, swift consequences, while at the same time acknowledging all the great work of these good cops that risk their lives every day for each and every one of us. So we walk the walk and we talk the talk. We make sure that we are firm, and we have to follow the rules. We have to be respectful to each and every one of the residents of Chicago and beyond. We have to be constitutional, that we have to hold ourselves accountable, to be proactive police officers, not just standing by watching things happen. That we hold you accountable for your productivity as well as we hold you accountable for following the rules. It's not enough just to show up during these difficult times. We have to be proactive. And so all of the above, as far as holding people accountable, not just for the rules, but for productivity. People want proactive policing today. They want it. And they want people to be trusting us, visible, engaged, and collaborative. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. I think obviously it'll be centered towards police, but I think also, Dr. Arwadi, this might be a question about victim services and support. I have both a question from a Gladstone Park resident and from Edgewater. One, what is being done to solve the unsolved murders of Black and brown women? And similarly, what can CPD do to protect communities and Black trans women from violence and murder?
I'll start again. So we've done a couple of things before now. We've stood up a family liaison unit inside our homicide unit whose total job is dedicated to contacting families of who their loved ones have been lost and are missing, to ensure that that family has a connection to not only the work being done by the detective, but they have a support system that people hadn't forgotten about them in their case, in their loved one. That's number one. Number two, we're also doing analysis of our data to look at not only the groups you named, but all groups of missing, including women, transgender, and to include Black and brown, to see where is the issue. What happened? Was this a person because of a domestic situation that left? Was this a young person running away from home because of some kind of abuse situation? So a deeper dive into the missing is really important to characterize what are the real issues and where are they? Are they throughout the city? Are there certain parts of the city? So we really want to do a deeper and deeper dive into missing women, issues regarding various groups, to include all of our LGBTQ community. In addition, our cold case is going to be something that you soon will see a launch of a video series focusing on solving our cold cases. Those are cases that are older cases that we haven't solved. It's not all challenging work. It's work that many detectives dedicate their lives to, and they love this work. They love solving crime. They love catching offenders. This year, we are seeing one of the highest levels of clearance rates of our homicides that we've seen in many, many years. Over 19-year high last year, and we're exceeding that high. Right now, clearance rates for homicides are at 68%. Clearance rates for homicides have been as low as 20%. Yeah, thank you. So it's a lot of hard work, a lot of collaboration with the community, a lot of technological advances help us solve crime, but without the community, we cannot achieve the level of clearance rates that all of us deserve. But 68% is above the national average, but we're not satisfied with being above the national average. We want to be even higher, so there's much more work to do. We recently, I'll close with this on this particular subject, we recently promoted over 200 new detectives for our violent crime units, particularly homicide. So we are building the capacity to lower the caseload per detective. So a low caseload per detective is a high clearance rate. A high level of trust in the community equals a high clearance rate because people come to you with information because they trust that you'll do something with it. So a lot more work to do. We're not celebrating anything. Our homicides are down 9% so far this year. Our shootings are down 14% down this year. But we have a commitment and a dedication from the men and women you see at your table that will work hard for you and risk their lives for you and will achieve even higher results for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add a little bit on the other side. We take for granted that when there is a violent crime, police will follow up, that police will be there doing the investigative work, working to solve that crime. What we would like to see is the same expectation that when there's been a violent crime, the person who is the victim, but not just that person, the family, the children who may have seen that event, are getting support services in that same way that is automatic and taken for granted. So under this mayor, yes, we have invested some more in making sure that there are mental health clinical services, but even more than that, we're really focused at the health department at making sure those mental health resources leave the walls of clinics, and especially where we're thinking about the victims of violent crime. And when I say that, I mean the indirect victims, and especially the kids as well. Making sure that we have a system across this city that does that outreach. It's important, critical that it happens on the police side. It is just as critical, and especially where you're thinking about kids, just as critical that those resources are expected and we can break some of the cycles that we see over and over again. So there's been major new investments in victim services with some of this new funding, just like there's been investments in some of the more traditional mental health, street outreach. You know, we have received funding at the health department at levels that we have not seen ever. And we're working, we have a long way to go, but we're working to make it an expectation that yes, the investigation happens, but so does the support.
And I don't want to belabor, but Tamara, I think you mentioned it earlier, but you want to just reemphasize the gender-based violence investments that have been made?
Yeah, I'll just note that $25 million has gone towards the city's first ever gender-based violence strategic plan, and there are many new investments at DFSS as well to address domestic violence and supports that are needed there. Commissioner, if you want to.
Thanks, Tamara. So right now we're really excited. We are taking our domestic violence division from a little team that received $10 million annually to now we have an additional $25 million. So right now we have opportunities that are actually currently on the street. One is $5 million to support cash assistance to survivors of gender and domestic violence. A lot of times when you're in a situation that's violent and you need to leave, some of the things you need is just maybe cash, right? Maybe it's to repair your car or you need groceries for your child, just simple basic necessities. so that RFP is currently published. The second one is rapid rehousing for survivors of gender-based violence. That's really important because, again, right, you need to make sure you're able to extract that family from the situation they're in and get them housing. And so this provides support for 1 year to 24 months of rapid rehousing. And while they're in that situation, they can actually catch their breath, right, and think about, like, what is my next plan? What's my next step? The third thing we're doing is legal assistance. A lot of people need just support with the legal system and how to navigate that, and so we provide that as well. Other supports that we're going to be offering include services for children who have witnessed violence in the home. We really haven't been able to provide that in the past because we were only focused really narrowly on intimate partner violence, and so being able to spread this will definitely be important. And then just lastly, we'll be doing an educational campaign for elementary and high school students about gender-based violence. So very exciting things coming on the horizon.
Speaking of high school and younger students, Chief Martinez, this one's maybe for you. A resident from Albany Park asks, can we make sure that CPS has a civic engagement class for both elementary and high school students?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, so first of all, those classes do exist. In fact, we're investing more in just getting even more of our students just to have them, just to be able to effectively express themselves and to lend their voice. And so we're doing that across our district. But the other thing we're doing across our district is really making sure that we're investing in our schools. We're following the mayor's lead, making sure that, for example, when your children are struggling in school, for whatever reason, that we have freed up intervention teachers that can work with them before they get too far behind. Making sure that our schools have, so that every child in every school has access to the arts. One of the things that I've seen is some schools have a richness in programs of the arts and others do not. And so the investments we're making for next year, every single school without exception, children will have access to the arts. Every single school will have resources for after-school programs, for Saturday programs. Every school will have resources for summer programs. Some of those the schools will be doing themselves, some of them will be in partnership with community agencies. And so we just want to make sure that our children really are set up for success, that our schools are set up for success, and we're going to continue to invest.
Great. I have a question. There's quite a few comments from Inglewood, from Auburn Gresham, from the South, where it just says lights. They want more lights, I think more infrastructure. This one is a little bit more specific from Lakeview, where they ask, it's a little bit of a long question, but the gist is about closing liquor stores that are open late at night.
About, sorry?
Closing liquor stores that are open late at night. And this person talks about folks go to the liquor store in their neighborhood that's open late at night, and then they drink in front of their home and are committing crimes. And so they want to know, is it possible to close the stores earlier than the ones that are open late night currently?
Well, look, we expect all businesses in the city of Chicago, particularly ones that have the privilege of having a liquor license, to operate safely and with the bounds of the law. And so what I would suggest to the person who asked the question, or anybody else in the audience where this is an issue, do a couple of things. Number one, call the local police department and report the nuisance that you're seeing. Talk to your local alderman, because aldermen have a lot of tools at their disposal to identify problem businesses. I thought I saw Ken Meyer here. Ken, are you here? Ken Meyer is our commissioner of the Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. Call 311 to report that problem business, and we will send inspectors out. And then if the business doesn't abide by the rules of the road, we will put that business on a watch list, and if necessary, we will shut them down. We are very concerned about liquor stores, about gas stations, and other places in certain neighborhoods that seem to be a magnet for chaos, crime, and other things. You don't have to tolerate those kinds of quality of life issues in your neighborhood. If you see a problem, flag it for us, and we will be all over it. I promise you that.
Lights.
You want to talk about lights? Yes.
It's kind of my favorite topic right now. I actually think that's a really important area because, to be honest, we know that when we improve lighting, we improve public safety. And I want to talk about this because there's a couple things. We have to improve lighting in the public way, but we also have to improve lighting in the private way, right? And so in the public way, we're actually looking at some innovative new approaches around working with folks like parks to say, what would it look like for us to leave some of our arena lighting on? In communities like Inglewood and Auburn Gresham as well, where we see commercial areas that aren't as lit up, it's not necessarily because the public lighting's different, it's because the private lighting's different, right? So where we have abandoned storefronts and areas like that, we need to work with ComEd to actually turn those lights back on because they help light up the commercial way. But yesterday we did announce new supports coming to actually support the lighting at your own home. Because while you may have light in your streets, you may even have some light in your alley, you may be part of an apartment building that has gangways that aren't lit up, or there may be other areas where you feel like if you could improve your lighting, we could prevent crime. And so as part of the new home and business protection rebate program, yes, we are going to be offering rebates for security cameras for your homes, businesses, condo associations, et cetera, but you're also going to be eligible to receive reimbursement on outdoor lights that are motion sensor detected, so that if this is something that's been a barrier to you providing more light in your home and in your community, we can also be out there and support that. And if you have innovative lighting ideas, as mentioned, I'm really all about this. Please come find me after, because I'd love to talk to you about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. A few more questions. One, we have quite a few from East Lakeview, Gold Coast, Uptown, Sheridan Park, Portage Park, all asking in general, what plans are in place to make CTA trains safer?
I'll take this one. So we've heard not only from the tables around this group, but other town halls, as well as our interaction with people across the community that has a stop for the CTA and who ride the CTA, that we want more resources. So a couple of things. We made a big announcement with CTA and Mayor and I that there's going to be more security officers added on the CTA that ride the trains. In addition, CPD made a commitment to add more officers to the CTA, but more immediately to the problem spots across. And I understand there's one in the 19th district that we need to add one to, that the commander is getting that information to our CTA commander to make sure that gets done immediately. So we have that location. I'm going to make sure that we address that issue, that stop in the 19th district. In addition, though, we are doing operations on the CTA. There's people who sell drugs on the CTA. There are people who do other types of narcotics and or gang activities on the CTA that we are focused on, bringing those offenders to justice. Now, the capacity to get officers riding the train will be a work in progress. We've added some officers. We need to add a lot more, to be quite honest with you. And we have plans to do that as we grow our department back to its full complement of officers that's funded. So more to come, but more immediately, we are listening to you on the issues of more officers, to include security officers and CPD on the trains. For the 19th district, for this area, we are adding officers to the stop that's been problematic here recently. And we are able to move officers around throughout the train system as we listen to you about where these issues are more predominantly, and we can do that on a on-demand basis. So we are obviously challenged with more people are riding, more back to normal, getting post-pandemic numbers in certain areas. And so we have to escalate our resources in response to more ridership and more people getting out and about riding the train. So please communicate to us here, are there locations where we have gaps? Because we want to hear that from you. We look at data, we know where the hot spots are as far as crime is concerned on the CTA. What we don't know is the rider experience. That's not only something we have to be more responsive. So if you frequent the CTA, you're a regular rider, and you know of areas where you never see a cop, let us know tonight. Let us respond to that. Hold us accountable to adding those officers to those areas where you see more criminality or maybe even quality of life issues that we can respond to in collaboration with other departments. Thank you.
And our last question, we had a sort of grouping of folks who asked about getting involved and how they can keep in touch. And this resident from Lakeview East has a question that I think everyone wants to know is, how do I get in touch with my local officer? You really want to do that in-person communication. How could they do that?
So I know the commanders are here, if you would all stand, and the area deputy chiefs, if you don't mind. So how you get in contact with your local officer, these are their bosses at the district level. So get their names and numbers if you don't already have them. And in addition to that, oh, okay, if we have a mic, we can do a quick round of introductions from each commander, if we have a mic for them. All right, we're getting a mic. While they get the mics, in addition, Tamara can talk about block clubs, neighborhood associations, beat meetings. There are various ways to get more involved with your officers that are assigned to your neighborhood. And we absolutely encourage you doing that. And we'll start with the introductions. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come out here and share this with us. I'm Brennan. I'm the commander of the 20th District, which is over on Lincoln Avenue, 5400 North Lincoln. It's the Andersonville area, uptown, borders Lawrence on the south, Peterson on the north, and from the lake to the river. So if you live in that area or you travel in that area, please stop by and say hello to me, and we'll talk, all right? Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. Oh, wow. This is really loud. Amin Jasani, commander of the 19th District. We actually have our CAPS officers over here and our CAPS sergeant. So please come and see us afterwards. We'll give you all the contact information that you guys need to reach out for whatever issues that you may be having.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Ednardo Gutierrez. I'm the commander of the 25th District. I'm at 5555 West Grand. If you need to get a hold of us, we're at 312-746-4496. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Deputy Chief Roberto Nieves. I am the Deputy Chief of Area 5, which is the northwest side of Chicago. It encompasses the 14th, 16th, 17th, 25th District, and it borders from the river west to the city limits, from Division Avenue on the south to the north on the city limits. And any request that you might have, I would suggest you just call the district station and ask for a community policing office, and you will be greeted by an officer there who would gather your information and send someone out to speak to you if need be, or address your concerns on the phone. But please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Brennan. I'm the commander of the 24th District, which is Rogers Park. So Mckenzie to the lake, Evanston border along Howard to Thorndale. That's our boundaries. 312-747-5907. That's our general number to the office. I will stick around afterwards and share contact information if that's what you'd like. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Commander Galen Caldwell. I am the commander of the Office of Community Policing for the Chicago Police Department. The Office of Community Policing is a citywide office so unlike the other district commanders here who have their boundaries, I pretty much work with the entire city's community policing office in each one of these districts, plus our central headquarters, where we have all our DARE and GREAT programs and some other youth programs, Police Athletic League, some of the officer-friendly stuff that we do, and we're rebuilding and trying to bring back. So my number is 312-745-5900, 312-745-5900. In addition to calling me, I do recommend you can always use 311 to get in contact and give your address and find out what your local police district, and they can connect you to your CAPS office. So that's always a good way if you don't know what your district is, or you don't know what your or you're trying to get in touch with your local CAPS office, that's a great way to get that number if you don't know it offhand. And you can also find it on the website as well.
Thank you everyone for coming out. I'm Beth Geltmeyer from the 12th District. We're the southernmost tip of Area 3, so we're Cermak to Division, the Expressway, all the way over to Mckenzie in some parts, so we have United Center and areas such as that. Our number is 312-746-8396. Feel free to stop by or jump on the internet and give us a ring. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michaeline Alexa. I'm the commander of the 17th District. We are located at 4650 on Pulaski. Our district goes from the river to Cicero, from Belmont to Devon, and we would love to see you anytime in the district and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Deputy Chief Gabriella Shimash of Area 3. Area 3 is the 12th, 19th, 20th, and 24th districts. So we go all the way north from Rogers Park, all the way down to our southern end, down in Pilsen. All of our commanders are here tonight, so feel free to reach out with the contact numbers they gave, and I'd also encourage you to use the websites, the chicagopolice.org, and also all of our districts have Twitter pages and our CAPS officers, so feel free to follow them on Facebook, social media, their Twitter pages. You find a lot of information there and information on our beat meetings. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Mckenzie. I'm the commander of the Community Safety Intervention Unit. Unit just developed by Superintendent Brown. So this unit, basically what we deal with, we go out and we do outreach for the individuals who are in the system, particularly the youth, the carjacking offenders. We reach out to them and we offer services and so forth. So this unit has been developed and it's in the progress right now. So we're looking forward to participating with the community and so forth, and building the trust and getting the resources to the youth as we need. Thank you.
I think that's it. Thank you so much. That was our last question. The mayor is going to give us some closing remarks, but I feel left out, so I also want to mention that if you have anything you want to have questions that are outside of the police and CPD, please feel free to contact community engagement at cityofchicago.org. We're happy to connect you to specific departments or help answer the questions whatever we can, specifically some of those questions about blight and things of that nature. But I would like to move this over to Mayor Lightfoot, who's going to close this out.
All right, thank you, Nubia. Thank you for all the hard work. Thank you to the community engagement team who has really put together these 6 different community safety town halls that we've done all across the city of Chicago. I wanted to make sure that you knew how we were going to take the next steps. Number one, this isn't one and done. This is an important way for us to get feedback from you about your concerns, and also how we're doing and things that we can do better. At the end of this process, the community engagement team is going to be compiling all the questions with answers that we've received from the 6 different town halls. We'll probably separate them geographically so you can see the kind of questions that percolated up across the various parts of the city, with specific answers and how you can not only get the information you need, understand better the investments that we're making, but also what next steps are going to be. So I just want to thank you one and all again for coming out tonight. Thank you for the aldermen who are here, and really encourage folks from your community to come out. Thank you to all of the city commissioners, but most importantly, thank you, our residents. As we said, this is all about accountability. We're holding ourselves accountable to make sure that we bring better safety and peace to neighborhoods all across the city, but we can't get there without you and your engagement. So thank you so much for participating, and God bless you all. Thank you.